I want to tell you about a man who turned 70 without realizing exactly when life began asking for a different kind of attention. I'm telling you his story calmly, not because it is dramatic, but because it is familiar. You might recognize parts of yourself in it, even if you don't want to admit it yet. When he turned 70, there was no celebration worth mentioning, no loud voices, no speeches, just a quiet morning, a warm cup of coffee, and the soft sound of a house that had learned to be silent. That silence mattered more than he expected. It wasn't loneliness. It was clarity arriving without warning. I've seen many people reach this age, and they often expect wisdom to feel triumphant. It rarely does. For him, wisdom arrived gently, almost politely, as if it didn't want to disturb what little time was left. And yet, once it arrived, it refused to leave. He had lived what most would call a good life, steady work, a predictable routine, responsibilities met. From the outside, there were no obvious failures. That's why the truth surprised him so deeply. Have you noticed how the most dangerous lessons come disguised as comfort? For decades, he believed time was something flexible, something that adjusted itself around good intentions. If he meant well, if he worked hard, if he cared deeply, then surely time would cooperate. That belief followed him quietly from one decade to the next, never causing alarm. In his 30s, he was busy becoming someone, building stability, proving reliability. He told himself this was the foundation for everything else. Health could wait, rest could wait, rest could wait, even relationships could wait, as long as the intentions were honest. Does that sound familiar to you? In his 40s, life became heavier but also more efficient. Days filled quickly, weeks passed without pause. He learned how to function without asking too many questions. When his body felt tired, he blamed stress. When sleep felt shallow, he blamed responsibility. He rarely blamed his habits. I remember noticing this pattern in him early on. He wasn't careless. He was practical. Practical people are often praised, but practicality has a quiet weakness. It teaches you to postpone anything that doesn't demand immediate attention. Doctors reassured him. His numbers were acceptable. His results were within range. He took that as confirmation that everything was fine. No one asked how fast he ate. No one asked how often he sat in silence. No one asked what his days felt like from the inside. Have you ever been asked that? His mother lived differently, slowly. She walked even when there was no destination. She ate simple food without checking labels. She rested without apology. He admired her, but never copied her. Modern life had convinced him there were better, faster solutions. By the time he reached 50, he noticed how quickly years began to compress. Time no longer felt wide, it felt narrow. But instead of changing, he adapted by becoming more efficient. Less attention, more routine. He functioned well, and functioning well can hide a lot. Here is where the truth began forming, even though he couldn't see it yet. The body doesn't collapse from one bad year. It responds faithfully to patterns built over decades. Every ignored signal is stored. Every shortcut is recorded. Nothing is wasted. He watched friends his age begin to struggle. Sudden diagnoses, unexpected limitations. Each story sounded abrupt, but when he looked closely, the warning signs had been present for years. They just hadn't been loud enough to interrupt daily life. At 60, urgency finally appeared. He started thinking about change, eating better, moving more, resting properly. But habits built over a lifetime don't welcome sudden attention. Change felt uncomfortable, almost disruptive. That discomfort became another excuse to delay. This is the part people rarely talk about. Change is hardest when it is most necessary. And by the time it feels necessary, time has already done much of its work. When he turned 70, the hard truth finally surfaced clearly. Not as regret, not as panic, as understanding. Understanding without time to negotiate. Understanding without the comfort of later. I'm telling you this because the lesson didn't come from a single mistake. It came from years of small, reasonable decisions that never felt dangerous, That's what makes this story important. And in the next part, I'll tell you exactly what that hard truth was, and why realizing it at 70 changes everything that comes after. I want to slow this down for a moment because what he realized at 70 didn't arrive as a sentence. It arrived as a pattern. A pattern he had been living inside for decades without naming it. Have you ever suddenly understood something you were already doing every day? The hard truth wasn't about age. That's important. Aging was just the moment when denial became impossible. The truth was simpler, and that's why it hurt. His life had been shaped less by the decisions he made, and more by the decisions he delayed. Delay felt harmless when he was younger, responsible even, waiting for the right moment, waiting for stability, waiting for certainty. Those words sound sensible, don't they? They sound like wisdom. But slowly, waiting became his default response to discomfort. I watched him ignore the quiet signals. The body never shouts first. It whispers. A little stiffness here, a little fatigue there, poor sleep that he blamed on stress, stress that he blamed on work, work that he blamed on responsibility. Do you see how easily that circle closes? Modern medicine helped him survive, but it never taught him how to live. Pills softened the edges. Tests reassured him temporarily. But no one asked about rhythm, about pace, about the constant pressure he carried without noticing it anymore. At 62, he tried to change, briefly. He walked for a few weeks, ate better for a month, went to bed earlier for a season. But habits built over decades resist short visits. When improvement wasn't immediate, he quietly returned to what felt familiar. This is where most people get stuck. They mistake discomfort for failure. But discomfort is often the sign that change is finally touching something real. He didn't know that then. He thought ease meant correctness. By 65, some things could no longer be ignored. Energy didn't return as easily. Recovery took longer. His body wasn't breaking. It was negotiating. And negotiations become harder when one side has been silent for too long. He began to notice something else. People his age talked mostly about loss. Lost strength. Lost friends. Lost time. But rarely about responsibility. Responsibility felt heavier than loss, because it implied choice. Here is the part that settled deeply into him. The body is not cruel. It is honest. It doesn't punish. It responds. And it responds precisely to what it has been given, day after day, year after year. At 70, this understanding stopped being theoretical. He saw clearly that no dramatic mistake had ruined his health. No single bad year had done the damage. It was accumulation. Quiet, patient accumulation. He felt a strange mix of calm and sadness. Calm because the mystery was gone. Sadness because the answer arrived late. Knowledge without time feels different than knowledge with opportunity. He didn't collapse under this realization. He didn't panic. He adjusted. He simplified. Fewer obligations. More silence. Slower mornings. He began walking again, not to fix the past, but to care for what remained. Some improvements came. Sleep softened. Breathing deepened. His mind felt clearer. But other things stayed. Limitations that would not reverse. This is another truth people avoid. Some changes come back. Others only stabilize. What stayed with him wasn't regret. It was responsibility finally accepted. Not with shame, with honesty. And that's when he began telling his story quietly. Not as advice, as warning. Because he knew something most people don't want to hear until it's late. And that brings us to the final part. The hard truth he learned at 70 was this. Understanding does not change a life. Only repeated action does. That sentence sounds simple, almost obvious. But most lives are built on the opposite belief. We believe insight protects us. That knowing better is the same as doing better. It isn't. He knew about health for years. He knew about balance. He knew about stress. None of that knowledge helped until it turned into habit. And habits, once delayed too long, become harder than ignorance. He realized something else too. Waiting feels safe because it doesn't demand courage. Action does. Especially small daily action. Especially when no one is watching. He stopped waiting for motivation. Motivation is unreliable. He built routine instead. Slow walks, simple meals, earlier nights, fewer arguments, less noise, none of it dramatic, all of it consistent. This is what people misunderstand about aging well. It isn't about fighting time. It's about cooperating with it before it becomes strict. I'm telling you his story because I've seen too many people meet this truth late. They expect a secret, a breakthrough, a single fix. But the truth is quieter than that. Your future is being built by ordinary days. Not intentions, not plans, days. If you're listening to this and you're over 60, you still have leverage. If you're 50, you have room. If you're younger, you have an advantage that disappears faster than you think. The body keeps records, faithfully, without judgment. Every choice sends a message. What message are you sending today? He learned this truth at 70. You don't have to. That's why I told you his story.